Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We have to, while we are talking, perhaps make new adjustments, but the basic notion is the same, it will not change. First, as Muslims, unfortunately, the appearance of the Muslim world is very chaotic. And it is going from bad to worse. 3 years ago, it was a bit different. 10 years ago, it was quite different. 20 years, 25 years ago, it was very different. At least there was peace. But now, there is no peace, there is no happiness, and the Muslim world is in a chaos, and the people or the countries are as if they are the adversaries of each other, fighting among themselves. To understand first what we are aiming, and then the conditions in the world, how it is, our adversaries, other countries, what kind of policies they have, and what is our goal, or rather, to say it better, what should our goal be? We have to define it very clearly. Every notion can only put into practice if there are people who believe in those notions. And if there are no believers, it will be futile to try to bring the peace and happiness to the Muslim world and the world in general. Because of this, now, as I said, we should first know what our goal is, what we are aiming for. This is a summary of our goal. First, alhamdulillah, we have to say that we are Muslims. The essence of our religion is love, affection, tolerance, and mercy. Unfortunately, today, so-called Islamic organizations or terror organizations never make attribute to these points. They only know killing. They don't understand what love, as Muslims, what we should possess: affection, love, tolerance, and mercy. For this reason, the goal of Muslims is to bring happiness and prosperity to all the world, all humanity, not just for the Muslims, for all the humanity. Unfortunately, today, there is no peace and happiness, neither in the Muslim world nor in the rest of the world. As Muslims, we have a responsibility to change these conditions. Let me add a few other things. As I said, alhamdulillah, we are Muslims, and the essence of our religion is love, affection, tolerance, and mercy. But at the same time, we as Muslims has a freedom, respect the freedom in the world, not just for Muslims, for other believers as well. God Almighty in the Quran says that there is no compulsion in religion. This is extremely important. You don't find such a phrase in Christianity, in the Bible, or in the Jewish religion. We don't respect other beliefs, but we tolerate them. There is a big difference. Respect is a different understanding, but toleration, if the God Almighty tolerated other people, other believers, then we do not have the right to force them to become Muslims. We can only invite them. We can tell them what Islam is. This is when we look at the world today, the basic notion that every human being has to cherish all the country. Without this tolerance, there will be no peace. Because of this belief, Muslims, in a very short time, expanded their influence in the world 1400 years ago to the Central Asia, to Caucasus, and to Spain, North Africa, and Europe. But they never forced anyone to change their belief. Now they say that there has been after the Second World War or during the First World War, there was an Armenian genocide in Turkey. This is rubbish. 1,000 years you will tolerate them to live in this country in peace, and then suddenly in 1 year you don't want them at all. You will massacre them. This is really rubbish. Why they are trying to inculcate this type of belief in the mind of not just Muslims, in the world in general, because they are afraid that Islam can find a place in the mind and in the heart of the people who are living in other countries. If they get to know the true Islam, what it is. Because of this, freedom of belief and thought is essential. La ikraha fi ddin. It is very obvious. There is no compulsion in religion. To take that, to bring really true understanding of this freedom, justice is something that we do not put aside. It is a must. In the Muslim world, justice should be immediately after this freedom should be accepted by all the countries. Unfortunately, we lack this. In most of the Muslim countries, we do not find true justice, true understanding of justice. Generally, the rulers, they say, you will do as I tell you. If you don't, you are an, how can I say, outcast. We cannot tolerate you. This is unacceptable. There are other conditions as well, that the rulers should let their people criticize them if the time comes. If they make mistakes, they should warn them that they are making mistakes. If there are any injustices in the country, we should be able to awaken the rulers that something is going wrong. Unfortunately, this causes chaos in the world. Dear brothers and sisters, these aims we should not forget and always cherish in their minds. But as I said, we should add a few extra notions there, like justice, like freedom, like controlling or making aware of the rulers when they make any mistake. This must be included in this category. The next slide is the strategies of imperialist countries in the world to dominate the world. We have this belief, these beliefs, basic notions, but the imperialists, they have different notions. And we have to know them as well, to take precaution. What is the first thing? Unfortunately, they are generally imperialist understanding they have. So they want, and in the past they have done, the method has changed a little bit. They always contemplate to invade strategic countries and regions. That is why Africa, Asia, America, all they were invaded by the capitalist countries in the past. Today, especially the supervision of energy resources and routes they have very strategic importance. They want to control where the energy resources are and how they are transported to their country or to other parts of the world. And at the same time, they want to control the strategic mines as well. Especially in the present age, strategic mines are very important to develop the control of the countries as well, to develop certain industries. And in addition to this, this is unfortunate. They don't openly say it, but their practice brings it, and they aim to prevent the economic independence of developing countries, especially the Muslim world. This is not their fault. They are aiming to control the world. So they don't want any resistance to their control. The responsibility falls upon us that we have to know this fact, and we have to formulate new policies to overcome this policy that is followed by the Western or imperialist countries. Who are these countries? The next slide, I have divided it into the world into 4 blocks, the world that we are living in. The first is the capitalist bloc. They are the famous imperialist countries. For the last 500 years, they have occupied, as I said, Africa, America, Asia, every country they could manage. Second bloc came into being at the beginning of the last century, that is the communist bloc. The communist bloc lately have changed. They have realized that the communism was not a proper policy to encourage the individuals to establish very high value enterprises. You have to, after you spend a lot of money and effort, you want to get a benefit from it. If you don't, why should you try to do anything at all? Because of this communist bloc have realized this, after Mao, China changed. And, well, famous dictators in the communist bloc, like Russia, certain dictators, after 1990s, they started changing and allocating their resources to individuals so that they can expand. And of course, in the world, there is what we call third world countries. Among this group, there is the Muslim world as well. There is the map. We can bring the. Now in here, I have shown the yellow block are the capitalist countries, United States, Canada, Europe, and Australia. I showed Japan in this category, but Japan is a different entity because they do not yet free themselves from the occupation of the United States. They are still under occupation, like Germany. They are not entirely free. The second bloc, the communist bloc, is Russia and China. They are interrelated, although there is a very, is it? No? There is a line comes here. Of course, we can't see the borders, but between China and Russia, there is a border. China is the, in population, largest country in the world, 1.5. 1,500,000,000 population, approximately, or 400. Doesn't make any difference. But the Russia is about 145 million. The population is coming down. China's area is about 10 million square meters, and Russia is about 27. So Russia is the largest country in the world, but the population in Siberia is very low in density. In addition to that, the green ones are the third world countries, what we call Central America, South America, especially Africa, and the South Asian countries as well. But among these, the fourth one, Muslim bloc, unfortunately, we are underdeveloped as well. The green countries are the Muslim bloc, which extends from Morocco to Indonesia. In this respect, what is the strategy of capitalist bloc? The next slide. United States and Europe the capitalist bloc, they want to control Russia and China as well. There are other reasons for trying to take them under their control. So they are encircling Russia and China. Especially China is very important. The American Navy almost encircled all of China, which is trying to expand to the open seas. At the same time, they want to expand EU, European Union, and creating a United Nations of Europe in this way. They have certain problems now. Britain have left, as you know, the European Union. Those countries who broke away from Russia, they became a part of European Union, but there are some complications in the policies that they are trying to follow. They do not fit in the European Union fully. And at the same time, of course, the capitalist countries, they want to dominate or invade the Muslim countries in general. And we should never forget, I make it a specific point here, in this age, one of their aim is the protection of Israel, especially with the United States. Any president who is elected, first he makes this point. That is, it is upon their responsibility and duty to protect Israel, even before the United States themselves. And because of this, they are trying to develop evangelical belief. Evangelical belief is for protection of Israel. You should, I advise you, if possible, to read a book called Forcing God's Hand. Grace Halsell, the lady who wrote this book, she passed away about 20 years ago, but she defines what this evangelic belief really means. In fact, they called themselves in the beginning born-again Christians, their basic notion. And they believe that Jesus will come soon, and Jesus will come to the world in Jerusalem. But the Jews have a different understanding. They believe a Mahdi will come. And both sides agree that Christians waiting for Jesus to come, Jews are waiting for Mahdi, but they say only when he comes, the other side will understand what we mean. So at the moment, there is no quarrel among themselves, but they are fighting for the same cause. That is why Israel is trying to bring down Masjid al-Aqsa, because according to their belief, Masjid al-Aqsa has to be pulled down. In its place, the masjid, or not masjid, the Solomon's temple will be erected. Afterwards, either Jesus or Messiah will come. So for the same goal, the odd thing is that here we have, although there is no reference in Quran to Mahdi, but in certain hadith, certain ulama believe that there will be one day someone called Mahdi who will be responsible to bring the Muslim world together and stage a struggle against the invaders, Christians or the Jews, doesn't make any difference. And there will be peace afterwards. We have such a belief as well. But when this fight starts, this is called Armageddon by their belief. From our point of view, we say it that it is the different struggle, and inshallah, the Americans again and the Christians believe that there will be in this fight goods and bads. Goods will be the Christians and Jews, bads the others, but the enemies, Gog and Magog. In our belief, we say, siz söyleyin what? Efendim? Yecuc and Mecuc. Yeah. And they say Gog and Magog. And they make it very clear that Gog is Russians and the Magog are Chinese. So they are preparing themselves to fight soon or later with Russians and Chinese. That is why Americans are encircling China. Now, to protect Israel, they've come to the Middle East. In Mediterranean, they are establishing very large bases just for this fight. This is the belief of the evangelical Christians. Of course, Israel has a very important, as I said, role here. They have a Zionist ideology. Trump's son-in-law was a Jew, a Zionist as well. Biden, he says that, well, I don't have any relatives of the Jews, but I believe in Zionism. And I am a servant of Zionism, which is the most dangerous thing, because among the Jews, there are people who are not Zionists, even in Israel. So the Zionist ideology is the ideology of Israel state, and their aim is to occupy the promised land and put into force the ideology of Greater Israel. They believe, you have up to now, must know, that God Almighty have promised them the Greater Israel from Euphrates to Nile. That is why they can push Arabs, Palestinians who are living in Jerusalem from their houses, and then they occupy it. This is our right. God Almighty promised us. What can we do? We have to push you out. And so-called modern countries, developed countries, they accept this ideology and support Israel. And because of this, Israel manipulates the influential countries to reach their goals. And what is this promised land? Next slide. The map is this, from Euphrates to Nile. This area belongs to them. Some parts of Turkey, Iran, Iraq, Syria altogether, Saudi Arabia, Egypt. Aim is this. That is why there has been chaos in Iraq. At the beginning of 2002, Americans have decided to invade Iraq under the pretext that Saddam had nuclear weapons. And so after 1 year they say, oh, we are sorry. After 1.5 million people were killed, they say, sorry, Saddam didn't have any weapons at all. They are really think the world is stupid, but they are stupid. And then, unfortunately, with the initiation of the Turkish government, Syrian problem erupted. Now the Syrians, nearly 600, 700,000 Syrians lost their lives. 3.5 to 4 million people in Turkey. At least 4 million people emigrated to Lebanon or Iraq, Saudi Arabia, other countries. At least 7 million people changed their land. They had to emigrate inside Syria. This is a big, really big problem, catastrophe that they are facing. And the next slide, in this category, Japan, as I said, still is under occupation, so they do not have their own policies yet. We don't know in future what Japan will adopt as a policy. Japan, at present, there are 2 countries outside United States who are really developing or developed very fast, industrially and technologically. In Europe, Germany; in the Eastern Asia, Japan. And they are very powerful. But because they are under occupation, they cannot do anything. We do not know. Once they become fully independent, we'll have to wait and see what type of policy they will follow. And in addition to that, in the South world, as you know, New Zealand and Australia, they are under the influence of United States and Britain, unfortunately. Of course, Westerners, for the last 200 years, to control the world, have developed certain organizations. And we have to understand that basically these international organizations, unfortunately, serve for the benefit of Israel. United Nations, it is the countries came together. We need such an organization, but nothing which will criticize Israel will come out of that organization. In action, there are sometimes certain attempts, but unfortunately, they are always controlled or blocked by the Western countries, especially there in the United Nations, 5 dominant countries who are composed of United States, Russia, China, Britain, and France. The last decision is made by these countries. There is NATO afterwards. This is a military organization. Now it seems to be weakening, but still it is a military organization, and their largest base in Turkey, Incirlik, and they dominate the world. In economic field, there is IMF, World Bank, and OECD. These institutions always manipulate the policies of the developing countries so that they will not be adverse country against their policies. Of course, there is the International Court of Justice, European Court of Human Rights, European Atomic Energy Agency, and UNESCO, Food Organization, etc. There are very many organizations, but all of them, basic notion is to protect the benefit of Israel. In addition to that, there are lobbies. Next, these lobbies always have an effect on country management, on different countries, even in the United States, European Union, Russia, everywhere. And at the same time, they especially manipulate these international organizations. These are just the names. Binay Brith is one of them, very famous. Bilderberg, this is like a think tank, works, but every year they make a meeting and they invite among Muslim countries those intellectuals that they want to influence. Masonic lodges, this is very famous, everyone knows. I was surprised, really, when I visited some of the Muslim countries in the hotels that I was staying. At the door, it says, Masonic lodge members meet such and such a date in this hotel. It very openly it is written so that someone from outside, if they go to their country without any knowledge, they will know that, I am a member of this Masonic lodge, I must attend this meeting. These are the most well-known and influential group. Rotary clubs, they are a bit below the Masonic lodges. Lions clubs, like the Rotary clubs, they prepare the members for Masonic lodges first, and the Trilateral Commission, etc. There are other organizations as well, but these are the most famous one. This triangle, in fact, defines from starting here the internal majlis, especially the 33 members of a lodge and 300 members. They expand, and then these are the certain organization, and Bilderberg, Binay Brith, and especially the French and British lodges are very important. Communism is one of these lodges as well. And Scotch Lodge is famous. These are all in Britain. York Lodge is very influential as well. And then you have other preparatory committees. At the end comes the All Humanity. You will see this in dollar, in a very different picture. Yes. Change the other one. Communist bloc, Russia. Just I have said earlier, Russia and China have changed for the last 30 years. They are adapting some of the capitalist bloc principles to improve their condition, because under the very strict communist rule and understanding, they could not compete with the capitalist bloc. So they changed their principles to a certain degree, and they are promoting individual enterprises in this way, and they are trying to rebuild and empower Russia again. 30 years ago, Russia economy collapsed altogether. System collapsed. But now they are awakening and they are trying to bring Russia to their former strength or threatening strength. And at the same time, Russia is trying to strengthen their alliance with China, and they are, especially Russia, have very rich oil and gas reserves. They are using this as a threat towards Europe. As you know, when it comes, they say they will slow down the supply, and they have certain problems. Now they have a little bit change. Kaliningrad, what is called, now the map is not here, Kaliningrad is in the North Sea. It is the largest base of Russians. Kaliningrad is about 50,000 square meters. That Slovenia and other countries, they have a direct line, train, which goes there from Russia, and it is their land. No one can interfere because they do not have any other base. All their submarines, sea force is in Kaliningrad. They have built another one in Asia, but it is too far away. That is why they are giving importance to this, but they cannot develop any base in Baltic Seas and Crimea because they have to pass through the straits in Turkey, Istanbul Boğazı and Dardanelles. So they cannot develop their bases, but now they are expanding and they have come to a stage that in Syria they have the biggest base that will open them air bases, sea, harbors to the world in general. That is why United States now is giving more importance to Mediterranean and to the Middle East, more than China. Of course, when the problem in Syria started, no one realized that the Russians will take such a step, but we made these warnings during that time that these are extremely strategic points and necessary precautions, if not taken, they will dominate this region. Now, next slide is China. China was, as I said, in population 1.5 billion, population largest country, 10 million square meters, which is a very large country. Now they are developing their private individual enterprises, and they are the fastest developing country in the world. At one time, they developed annually 15%, 17%. This is unbelievable figures. Now they've come to slow down to 6%, 7%. There are no other country in the world which develops in such a rate. The fastest rate we caught in the past as Turkey was 8 or 9%. Now we are going back instead of developing. So China is becoming a world power. And they have a very strong presence in the Pacific Ocean. Although they are a very large country, 10 million square meters, they are utilizing the natural resources of Africa, South America, and Asia. Most probably you know, they are establishing certain plants as well in these countries. They are building bridges, building roads, but they carry the people who are going to work on those sites from China. They have colonies now in Africa, in South America. Increasing their GDP by investment in production and South America, in production in industry and high technology. Now, at one time, they thought that the Chinese did not have the highest technology, but now everyone knows that they can build machines, they can produce telephones better than the Americans. So this is extremely important. And of course, they are improving their capability of military force. They have the largest army in the world. Of course, when you have 1.5 billion people, 10 million military force is very important for other countries, but it is nothing for China. And they are trying to improve their strategic alliance with Russia as well, because there is the danger of, in coming future, a conflict between Russia and China which will harm their development. And they are utilizing its immense workforce for growth and development in general. And the other countries, when we come, third world countries, they have large population, but all of them are poor. There is no developed country in this third world countries, among these world countries. There is some development to a certain degree in certain sectors which will provide raw materials for the Western countries, not for themselves. And they have regional influences depending on their size. India is a regional force. Nigeria is important, or the North African countries. But to a certain, it is always limited. Even Turkey's influence, Iran, Pakistan, Bangladesh, these are the countries, unfortunately. South America is, again, very rich in energy resources. Africa is another continent which is extremely poor. Of course, there are certain organizations which these countries have established among themselves. There is BRICS, 5 countries, which were very important at one time, but now no one mentions it. There is SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. These are 6 countries. Organization of Black Sea Economic Cooperation. There are 12 countries in this organization. ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Countries. African Union, 54 countries. They now and then meet, but unfortunately, they cannot produce a policy which could be accepted. When it comes to the Muslim countries, that is the largest one, OIC, Organization of Islamic Cooperation, 57 countries. In fact, this is the most important organization among the Muslims, but unfortunately, non-influential at all. In Saudi Arabia, that is one of the, perhaps, drawbacks, because they do not want to develop the OIC in any way to become influential. And there is Economic Cooperation Organization, including Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and the Turkic countries, what we call, which became independent after the collapse of Russia. And from our point of view, one of the most important organizations is D8, Developing Aid. Developing Aid was organized by Professor Erbakan, and the signature was put down in 1997, just before he resigned. He brought all the leaders of these 8 countries to Istanbul. Unfortunately, this is dwarfed as well, because no country makes an attempt to bring the potential in D8. D8 is very important. Turkey, Iran, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Malaysia, Indonesia, Egypt, and Nigeria. These are very important. 1 billion people live in these countries. 1 billion. And these countries have at least 65% of the world's energy resources. But unfortunately, we do not make any benefit of it. Next slide. We have to make some reference to the potentials of the Muslim world. First, we have the high moral values of Islam, its dynamic history, and strategic position. We have to remember the past. We came together in the past. We were together in the past. Even if we were different independent countries, we acted when it was necessary together. But after the First World War, unfortunately, we were dispersed. And its extensive geography from Morocco to Indonesia, rich natural resources, as I have pointed just before, 75% of the world's energy resources, and population of nearly 2 billion people. World's youngest population lives in these countries. Large Muslim population in Central Asia, and in addition to this, large number of Muslims in China, Russia, and India. Unfortunately, in Russia, to a certain degree, tolerance exists, but in China, unfortunately, there is very big oppression on Uyghurs, and India, unfortunately, they have declared Islam as the enemy, and they are oppressing, suppressing the Muslims. And in addition to this, there is a very rapid increase in the Muslim population in United States and Europe. Next slide. Of course, we have this potential, but there is the concerns and threats that we face. First, we are not utilizing our natural resources properly. This is the biggest and very important aspect. And secondly, we are threatened by Zionists, by Israel, for the so-called promised land. They are threatening to invade the Muslim countries, the heart of the Muslim countries. And at the same time, domination of the Muslim world and exploitation of its resources by Zionist and imperialist powers through a long-term policy. It is not just for few years that we can expect. They have developing these policies for the last 300 years almost. And the next slide shows of course, this has slightly changed. Crisis in Palestine, Arakan, Myanmar, Kashmir, Moro, Philippines. Well, in Moro, the problem, inshallah, has been solved, it seems, and they are satisfied by the solution. And Karabakh is really improved the conditions to a certain degree. War zones, unfortunately, Afghanistan is still continuing. Now, Turkey, by the United States, is forced to take the responsibility United States had in Afghanistan. Turkey should never take part in that conflict, because we have up to now good relations with both sides. But now if we intervene in between, then we'll be enemy sooner or later, at least of one side, which is extremely dangerous. Because Afghanistan is a country we have had good relations since the establishment of Turkey in 1920s. After the collapse of Ottomans, when the War of Independence started, from Pakistan, Bangladesh, India at that time, and Afghanistan, a lot of aid came. And afterwards, when two countries were established, all the military force was trained in Turkey, Afghan forces. But now we have no relationship. United States have taken the responsibility and caused a lot of problems. Iraq, there is no war at present, but it is a place where crisis exists. Syria, the war seems to be coming to an end, but still there are problems. There is no peace in Syria. And I do not think they will allow peace to exist in Syria, neither United States nor the Russians. There will be always some problem. Libya, again, there are some problems similar to Syria. Yemen, what is the importance of Yemen? Why there is chaos in Yemen? Why there is fighting in Yemen? There is only one reason. The Red Sea crossing to the open seas. On one side there is Djibouti, on this side there is Yemen. The Zionists want to control both sides. They don't want any interference from outside. Otherwise, Yemen has no importance. Only that strategic point. Opening of the Red Sea, that means Israel to the open seas. That is the only reason. That is why they will never, until and unless they control Yemen wholly, they will not leave it. That is Somalia. Somalia is the poorest country in the world, I think. The really pitiful country. Somali people are really good believers, basically. But they have created at least 5, 6 countries out of Somalia. Continuously, Djibouti, well, how did it come into existence? Djibouti became independent in 1977. Why? I remember it very clearly. I was a member of parliament. We were sent from Turkey to follow the proceedings of the United Nations for 1 month. We stayed in a hotel, and the new president of Djibouti, he was an imam. He was staying with us in the same hotel. That's why I remember. The population is not 400,000 or 500,000 people. But the Americans, they say, this is your country, you rule this country, we'll pay every year $200 or $300 million as a rent, but we'll have a force of 10,000 in Djibouti. French, they have at least 5,000. Turkey, we have at least 2,000 or 3,000 people, military force in Djibouti. That is the only reason Djibouti became an independent country. Now, it is the turn of, unfortunately, Yemenis. And internal conflicts exist in Egypt, Bangladesh, Central African Republic, Mali, and to a certain degree now in Nigeria. In most of the countries in Africa, there are problems, but from other point of view, special cases I put forward, Uyghurs in China and the Cherkess people or Turks, you can say to a certain degree, in Crimea, in the Russian parts. Yes, now from now on, we have to pay some attention as Muslim world, what we need and what the world in general needs. We are coming back to the beginning when I put forward certain notions. In fact, we want peace and prosperity in the world as a whole. How it can be realized? The first thing is, these are very short. When we are talking to a Westerner or someone who is very new to this understanding that we are trying to project, we have to be very careful. We have to revive Islamic values. But what are Islamic values? This is the biggest problem. We go to mosques, we go to Muslim groups, they do not talk about the basic Islamic notions. Some of them give a lot of importance to prayers, which is very important. We cannot say that we do not pay attention to prayers, or to some other notions. If you are following an imam or a religious leader, you have your lessons and you perform it every day. These are very good attributes, actions, but we unfortunately forget and do not pay any attention to the basic Islamic values that I mentioned in the beginning. First, we should control our mouth. When we are talking, we should not start something by incriminating the people we are talking. We should not just from top to bottom criticize them. We should try to make them understand what Islam is. That is why in the beginning I said freedom of religion, belief is basically our notion. Unfortunately, it exists in the West better than in our country. We have to accept it. But they are not sincere, because now, especially those who are coming from Europe, know that there is something called Islamophobia. What is Islamophobia? Fear of Islam. Now, how can you fear of Islam when Islam means peace, essentially? But they are trying to create this understanding so that people will not try to understand Islam, learn Islam. So, Islamic values, when we say we have to go deep, unfortunately, in most of the countries, Muslim countries, they don't want anyone to talk about it. Freedom of belief and religion. They don't want to talk about it. How will you keep those values? By justice. Without justice, there will not be any Islamic understanding in none of the Muslim countries. Islamic understanding is based on justice and peace. Without justice, you cannot have peace in the Islamic world, and you cannot claim that you have an Islamic understanding. Now, for example, in some places, hijab is very strict. The ladies will not show any of their eyes either. Well, if you prefer to dress up like that, no one can criticize you. But you cannot force everybody to dress in that way, because from the beginning, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam have shown us what a proper dress is. Hijab is very important for us. But the limits that we are trying to lay down, and especially to push women outside the social arena, is extremely difficult. I mean, we know that during the time of Hazrat Umar, he appointed a woman to control bazaar. Why? He said that they are the ones who are influenced by the values or the prices of the bazaar. Market. He didn't give it to a man. When this decision was taken 40 and 100 years ago, when the Europeans were discussing whether women was really a human being or not, whether women have any soul or not. At one point they said, no, yes, these women, they look like men, They have a soul, but that soul is always under the influence of shaitan. So what they did in Spain, when they suspected that a woman was influenced by shaitan, they burnt them. Burnt them physically for 50 years. Now they are trying to tell us women, how important is women in the human history. For centuries, they did not give women the right of possession. The Prophet Muhammad, Islam gave the women this right 1400 years ago. Well, in practice, in different countries, there has been some wrongdoings as well, but you cannot attribute this to Islam. Nothing to do with Islam. So we have to revive true Islamic belief. We let the world know, we must let them know what Islam is. The notions which was accepted by Muslims hundreds of years ago, the Westerners treated women, in such a way, not even human being. This is a very important issue. We should write books on this, not just articles. In addition to this, we should use our natural resources efficiently. Whatever natural resource, mines or energy resources or land which we can cultivate for food, we should make these resources, use these resources efficiently. This is extremely important. Otherwise, we can't become a strong country. This is the basic notion, in fact, of D8. It is the cooperation, economic cooperation among Muslim countries, 8 countries. It is not limited, just 8. We can expand that. Because of this, economically, we have to make efficient use of natural resources. And thirdly, we have to establish strong ties among Muslim countries. We are fighting now. There is chaos. Unfortunately, there is OIC. They do not spend any effort to stop the fighting among the Muslim countries. And lastly, creating sincere and strong alliances in the political arena. Politicians make the decisions at the end. But we have to start, like this meeting, at the grassroots. When Erbakan decided to take part in political activities, in his mind there was the unity of the Muslim world. Where did he start? In 1969, when Qudus, Masjid al-Aqsa, was occupied by the Zionists, he said that we'll have the first Masjid al-Aqsa meeting, Qudus meeting in Konya. And he invited representatives from all the Muslim countries and from Europe, organizations which had, well, but they were very weak at that time. In Europe, it is extremely important. What happened? We started knowing each other. I knew when I go to Pakistan, whom I will meet. In Bangladesh, who is with me? In Egypt, in Nigeria, in Indonesia, Malaysia, Iran, people started knowing each other. And this developed into, later on, political cooperation. It starts from the basic root. That is why this meeting that we are having is extremely important from my point of view, because you are from different Muslim countries coming, and inshallah, later on, when the time comes, you will establish ties with your friends who you meet in these organizations. Now, I want to come to the steps taken by the current world powers against Islam. First existing condition in the world, unfortunately, we have been saying it again and again, there is no peace and prosperity in the world. Islamic world is in the grip of imperialism and Zionism, unfortunately. All the Muslim countries is under the influence of some developed countries. We have to know this to solve the problem. And the policies that they adopt to attain their goals, who these countries, imperialist countries, who are trying to influence Muslim world and try to prevent them from developing. What they do, they try to distort and weaken the Islamic tenets. The values that I have made reference, they don't want us to talk on those points. They make reference to so many things that do not have any influence on our policies, unfortunately. And in their countries, they are inciting Islamophobia. Islamophobia did not happen suddenly. This is a project to let the European, because in European countries at one time, they wanted, after the war, to develop their countries. They wanted workers from Muslim countries. 3-4 million people went from Turkey to Europe. Basically, Germany and France, Belgium. After 30, 40 years, they settled there. And they became a part of Europe. Their neighbors were influenced by Muslims. Some of them started accepting Islam. This frightened them. So they tried to influence the Europeans on a different line, saying that Islam is a religion of violence. They talk of jihad. They talk of war. And some of us, do this, unfortunately. But what jihad is, we do not really sometimes understand ourselves as well. Jihad means to establish a rule where everyone will have freedom of choice of their religion, action. They did not force anyone to become Muslims. Never. That is why, for example, as I said, Armenians in Turkey, for 100,000 years, they lived together. And they were not forced. But they want to change this. In a few minutes, I will come what they are doing, what they have done to change this understanding. And unfortunately, in the economical, industrial, and technological fields, they are trying to weaken the Muslim countries. The next stage is the steps taken by the current world powers against Islam. In addition to long-term plans, they are trying to incite ethnic discourse among the Muslims, fighting, and instigating sectarian hatred. You are Shafi, you are Hanafi, Hanbali, Jafari, you are, especially with Iran, Sunni and Shia. Why should we fight with each other? I have my own understanding of Islam, and Iran, they have a different understanding. I cannot force them to become just like myself. These are two ethnic discourse and sectarian differences we are trying to force our way of life is extremely dangerous. We have to take necessary steps to prevent these plans, otherwise they will spread throughout the Muslim world, especially Turkey, Iran, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, etc. Yes, the steps taken by the current world powers against Islam, this is the third. In order to dominate the Muslim world, they incite and support, unfortunately, terrorism and extremist movements. They did not come up on their own, ISIL or something like that. They are directly, most of them, financed by the Western powers, because they incite and support terrorism and extremist activities. In this way, they cause chaos, weaken the belief in the Muslim unity. At the same time, they are corrupting the society through polluting Islamic ideology and moral values. Continuation of exploitation of Muslim countries through political and economic domination, I have mentioned a few times during this talk. Political intervention through submissive administrations. They bring to power certain people who have a certain understanding which will cooperate with the Western powers. This is extremely, unfortunately, dangerous. Misguiding the Muslim public through media. Media organs, unfortunately, are controlled basically by the capitalist bloc. We have to be very careful in that respect and ensure economic dependency on current world powers through government and business circles. Here I will speed up a little bit. The next, we have to know certain people, certain facts. In historical context, how Israel came into existence. the first step was taken by the first Zionist Congress, which was convened in Brussels in 1897. Do you know this? Everybody knows this fact. How many people attended that meeting? About 100. Not very many people, and they were not very influential. And they requested from Abdul Hamid Khan allocation of land to establish a state called Israel in Palestine. When Abdul Hamid Khan refused that demand, they abdicated him in 1909. The first one is Theodor Herzl, the first chap. He died. He came and he met Sultan Abdul Hamid Khan at the beginning of 1900, and he reported these actions to Rothschild in Britain. Later on, the following two chaps came into view. They abdication of Abdul Hamid Khan. Afterwards, they abolished the Ottoman state and the annihilation of the Islamic faith. This was their idea. The historical dates I will now point out to the road to establishing the Israel state. First, as I said, in 1897, the Zionist Congress, which ended up by the abdication of Sultan Abdul Hamid Khan in 1909, and this laid the ground for the establishment of Israel. The First World War in 1914 started between Britain and Germany, but somehow Turkey, Ottomans, became part of this conflict. And although the Ottomans, wanted to become a part of, to act in that war with Britain did not accept. So Turkey became a partner with the Germans. And in 1916, Britain and French governments appointed two people, Sykes and Picot. They made an agreement, which I will show you the map, how the Ottoman state was going to be divided. And in 1917, which is extremely important, Sykes-Picot is an agreement which was not put into force. But Sykes, the Balfour Declaration was imported in 1917. Why? Because the British government met and decided to help the creation of a state called Israel in Palestine. There was no Jews living in Palestine at that time. I mean, when I say there was no Jews, there was a couple of thousand people, that's all. And then Turkey lost the war. First agreement called Sevr was signed by the Westerners, which was not put into force. Later on, in 1923, Lausanne Agreement was made, where the Turkish borders was drawn, today's borders at that time. Later on, they realized that Israel could not be established after the war. So within 20 years, this is extremely important from my point of view, how a world war happens, and within 20 years, the country who lost the war becomes so strong to declare another war against Britain. This is odd to me. And this happened. And after the Second World War, which started in 1939, finished in 1945, where the State of Israel was established. This is the Sykes-Picot Agreement. They divided Ottoman state. All these lands belong to Ottomans. French side, Britain, Russian, Armenians. It was divided, but this could not put into practice. Later on, there is the other Sèvres Agreement, which this is the worst scenario called Sèvres, which was accepted by, unfortunately, the Ottoman state at that time. Again, this could not be put into force. Later on, the Lausanne Agreement was made, which drew the present borders. This was signed in Lausanne. Our borders and borders of the other countries was drawn in 1924. Now, what happened afterwards, I want to put forward. After the Second World War, in 1944, Bretton Woods Agreement Treaty was signed to control the world financial policies. Yalta Conference was organized in Yalta in Russia, which was attended by Roosevelt, American President, Churchill, Prime Minister of Britain, and Stalin, Russian leader. Erbakan Hoca always said that we have to have a second Yalta Conference to change the world, which was decided by these three leaders. Inshallah, one day, of course, the Yalta Conference will not be held in Yalta, somewhere else, inshallah, but the new world order will be established. And in 1945, United Nations and related institutions was established. Again, at the beginning, what did I say? All these international organizations have different aims, but the basic aim is for the establishment and protection of Israel. Never forget. And Israel was established in 1947. In fact, 47 it was established, but countries started to recognize the existence of Israel after 1948. NATO as a military force was established in 1949. And in Europe, the basic agreement, the first agreement which later on became European Union, sometimes I put Turkish some words, because you could only manufacture weapons by coal and iron. First agreement was there. Later on, Treaty of Rome for the European Economic Community was established in 1957. From 1947 to 1991, we lived through a Cold War area. There was a Cold War. It was not, weapons were not used by communist bloc and the capitalist bloc for nearly, 34 years, or 50 years. 44 years, from 1947 till 1991. And in 1991, Soviet Union collapsed, dispersed, very many countries created in Europe and in Central Asia. Because of this, NATO was established in the beginning against the Russian invasion. The goal of NATO was redefined. NATO was not abolished. Çünkü NATO, in fact, basically is trying to protect Israel. Now, after that, in 1989 and 1991, those 2 years was really very different years, but after 1991, especially West and East Germany united. Berlin became the capital of Germany, and a new Europe was, so to say, created. But 9/11 attacks in New York against the Twin Towers is extremely important, because this attack gave pretext for the gross violation of human rights and common law, unfortunately. Anyone who have a sense of safety in buildings and at the same time protection, control of the airspace, knows that two planes, not military planes, civil planes, could take off 400-500 kilometers away from New York and Washington without any airspace control, come to New York and to Washington and attack the headquarters of United States Army. This is impossible. Any plane without defining their course and flight number cannot approach Pentagon airspace for 200 kilometers at least. The military planes will take off and bring that plane down, because it is a danger. For the Twin Towers, it is exactly the same thing. Planes cannot, for one thing, if they are not guided by this air control systems, they cannot aim and go to their place where they want to reach. Impossible, they say. They have to be guided from ground. And how it happened that these two planes, and they are controlled by Muslims, so-called, and they were just trainees. They were trained only for 6 months, and then they could fly the most developed planes in the world. You need at least 2 years, 3 years training to fly such a plane. This is the first thing. Second, two planes came and hit the buildings in New York. Have you ever heard of the Empire State Building in New York? which was, when was it built? In 1930s. And I'll give you an information, if you did not hear it before. A plane hit that building in 1937 or 6, and that building did not collapse. How come after 60, 70 years, buildings which were more modern and safer than the Empire State Building, they collapsed? This is unbelievable. And at the same time, they found the passport of one of the pilots, which showed that he was a Muslim. The buildings collapsed, everything was burnt down, but a passport was not destroyed at all. These show that how stupid it was to say that these planes were flown by the Muslims to Pentagon. That is impossible. As I said, the airspace will not allow air control any plane to approach Pentagon nearer than 200 kilometers without making himself recognized by the ground people. These questions are not asked. I am not asking myself. These questions, in fact, was asked by experts in the United States, but they were just disregarded. This shows that this was a plan to create an atmosphere against the Muslims. They are warning me to speed up. This is the map of Palestine, which was Israel, which was occupied in land of Palestine by Israel in 1946-47. Within very short time, the place, this was occupied, the dark areas, by Palestinians. Unfortunately, as you can see, 1946, 1947, Israel occupied a lot of place. 1967, the Palestinians were squashed in such a place. Now, this is worse than the present condition today. Unfortunately, that is what is called the development in Palestine. Well, I will speed up. Schemes of imperialist countries after the collapse of the USSR. As I said earlier, the change of concept of NATO was a very important step, because from now on it was not the communism but Islam, the real enemy. Unfortunately, there was provocation of war among Muslim countries between Iraq, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, etc. Direct invasion of Bosnia and Afghanistan, especially Bosnia in 1990s, was big catastrophe. 9,000 people were just massacred. Military coup in Turkey, 1997, 28 of February, and in Egypt later on. Terrorism activities by Al-Qaeda and ISIS, provocation of civil conflicts in different countries, and economic domination of the Muslim and third world countries in general. This I mentioned earlier, 9/11, the blame was put on Muslims. The collapse of these two buildings, in fact, not just two buildings, 7 buildings were collapsed. There are other 5 buildings no plane hit that collapsed as well during that time. Attack on Pentagon as passport fast, as I said, prevention of official investigation and inquiries, accept such a reformation attempt. They are trying to create a reformist and conservative conflict. At the same time, inter-religious dialogue. They are trying to force us to get in touch with so-called Abrahamic religion, with Christianity and Jews. We have not such an idea. We know that they were given books, but they have distorted the books from the beginning. In addition, inter-civilization dialogue. These are all to change our understanding of religion of Islam. And in this context, so-called moderate Islam. They are trying to introduce degeneration of Islamic values and collapse of family. Especially the understanding of family in Islamic world is extremely important because family is the basic nucleus of community. If it is destroyed, there will be no proper understanding of society. And in addition, the third, to obstruct the spread of Islam in the West, creating Islamophobia, supporting the, unfortunately, radical movements. Next is that, of course, in the Muslim world, there has been a lot of efforts to bring the Muslim world together. Just after the collapse of the Ottoman state, Khilafat movement in 1930s was started, which they were not successful. In Pakistan, Abul Ala Maududi, Jamaat-e-Islami leader, he was very influential. I met him, Alhamdulillah. In Egypt, Hassan al-Banna, Ikhwan al-Muslimin movement, he was killed, unfortunately, earlier. They were very good organizations, but they, unfortunately, were oppressed by the Western-supported military coup. In Turkey, Necmettin Erbakan started a movement in 1969, but the parties that he established, 4 parties, were banned by military or the courts, which were under the influence of military rulers. And the last is the party which I am the president, Saadet. And in Iran, Khomeini started a movement which influenced the world in general, but because of their mazhab, they are trying to cause disruption between the Muslim countries. Dear brothers and sisters, now goals of the Milli Görüş, what we call Milli Görüş. When we say Milli Görüş, this Milli is not national. It's the Millet Ibrahim it comes from. The Görüş of Millet Ibrahim, I put it underneath. We want our countries such countries who can be comfortably lived in. This is actually, everyone should feel happy to live in his country. Conditions should be prepared for this, where the citizens feel secure, content, and their needs fulfilled. Social, ethical, moral, and at the same time economic needs. And we have to become powerful and influential countries. Each country should strive to become strong. And then the third stage, we should create a world where justice in this way means haq in its true sense. And to establish countries where people will be happy to live in, we have to develop moral and spiritual values. At the same time, we have to develop economic and material needs of individuals, and we have to always have the idea of coming together, uniting with the rest of the Muslim world. For this, what does the Muslim world and the world in general need? We say peace and prosperity in the world can only be attained, which I made reference earlier, reviving the Islamic values is essential. We have to make efficient use of our natural resources. We have to establish strong ties among Muslim communities before political, and then creating sincere and strong alliances in the political arena. The basic principles of a new world order is the 6 principles which was mentioned in the establishment of the aid. We should not resort to war. Through peaceful means, we should try to establish a new world order. We should not resort to conflict, but we should cherish dialogue. Talk with people. And we should not allow the strong countries to exploit natural resources. Instead, cooperate. We don't want them not to make use of our natural resources, but they should pay what they take. Secondly, there should not be any double standard, but justice should be upheld, and there should not be arrogance, but equality. The Westerners always think that they know better than anyone else. No, you don't. We know as good as you may claim to know. And our mind works better than yours. We should let them know. And we should not resort to oppression and superiority, but human rights, freedom, and democracy. And for this reason, we should have our own organizations where United Nations of Muslim countries should be established. There is OIC, but unfortunately it does not serve in that respect. We should have a common market of Muslim countries. We should cooperate. We should buy and sell from among ourselves. We should have a common Islamic currency. Why should we use dollars or euro, or Turkish lira even. There should be an Islamic currency. We should have a Muslim defense pact, military, that we should cooperate. And we should cooperate in cultural fields. And we should have technological cooperation among the Muslim countries and cooperation of Muslim countries for research and development. To be established, to reach this goal, what we need for all of us, I am saying this. First, we have to believe in it, that we can establish such a new world order. If you don't believe it, forget it. You won't be able to do anything at all in that respect. And then we have to work to put that into implementation. That means, if necessary, we should take part either in technological way or in political arena. Make this idea our permanent and utmost goal. Every day we should repeat to ourselves that we are going to work for such a goal. And you should know that the path to unity requires patience and sacrifice. It doesn't come easily. And you should not forget that to overcome the obstacles, Muslims have to work on a well-planned course. We have to make a plan. And the practical steps to be taken for this cause, we need to prioritize the issues which we already agree upon. Like Erbakan started with Kudus meeting. We have to increase trade among Muslim countries, which is very easy, in fact. We should organize joint cultural programs, just like we are having here. We should create joint investments. Businessmen, especially, should go to Pakistan, should go to Bangladesh, Iran, Nigeria, and cooperate with the businessmen in those countries and establish new plants. And some of them should come and do the same in Turkey and in other countries. We must increase student exchange programs, again, like this one, because we establish friendship in this way, and we must enrich and disseminate programs about the Muslim union. The next, what do we have to prioritize? We must not forget that Islam cannot be revived. I have mentioned this main reference a few pages earlier, by establishing alliances with the enemies of Islam. They want to destroy Islam, we won't cooperate to revive Islam with those countries. This is impossible. We can come together with different countries, but not for this purpose. We have to prepare our countries towards establishing this union, and we have to be ready to be a part of such a union. As a first step, we must stop the bloodshed in the Muslim world. This is important, even perhaps we should put it at the top. And we have to educate upcoming generations with strong moral and spiritual values. And we must ensure that our countries are fully developed and are empowered through industrialization and acquisition of high technology. And lastly, we have to speed up our efforts to encourage joint decision-making in the Muslim world. What is this photograph? During Hajj, millions of Muslims come together as individuals. Now, because of this pandemic, we can't do this. But this happened. These millions come from Asia, Africa, America, Australia, all of the countries. There are blacks, there are whites, red-skinned Indians, whatever you can mention. And we are all brothers and sisters. We come together. Hajj is in fact to understand and recognize that we can come together. It is not as difficult as we think. I think we have to know that by establishing the Muslim Union, we will bring peace and prosperity, not only to the Muslim world, but also to the entire humanity. This is a long presentation. If I bored you, excuse my attempt, but I hope that you will go back step by step what I tried to bring into your view. We are Muslims. We have to come together. We have to change our countries and this world. And this is possible. This is not just an ideology. This is belief. Because of this, we have to empower ourselves. And we have to show very great put forward effort to reach this goal. I thank you very much for listening to this conference, and inshallah take leave. Of course, we have not said our prayers. Inshallah, we will say the prayer and then we'll leave, inshallah. Thank you very much. Again, Assalamu alaikum.